So we're gonna get started. If you need interpretation, please follow the instruction on the screen. So if you are here for the social media and youth anxiety webinar, you have definitely come to the right place. My name is Serena Nguyen. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have the honor of being the social worker for the Simi Valley Unified School District. A big welcome to everyone, and thank you again for choosing to spend the evening with us. Last time I shared that being a parent myself, I understand how much planning and coordinating it takes to attend a meeting at 7 p.m. So once again, thank you. And we are so excited to have you join us tonight. Sid, if you can change to the next page.
Buenas noches, muchas gracias por estar aquí en esta reunión. Si necesitan interpretación en español, las instrucciones estaban en la pantalla. El número de teléfono es 805-306-4500. La extensión es 4798 y la contraseña va a ser 2258. Gracias.
Thank you, Yvonne. Okay, one more, Sid. We're going to review the webinar engagement. We have Jake.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this, so the entire presentation will be available on our website in the next couple of days. The website is the district website, so it's www.simivalleyusd.org. The slide deck that you'll be watching will also be up there, so you can have those notes instead of trying to take them down right now. In a webinar format, we cannot see you or hear you. We know that you're there. We can see your names. We're going to use the chat room or the chat feature in order to field questions later on. So all I need you to do is enter a chat question. Everybody can see your question and everybody can see the answers. The questions that are easy, I can just answer as we go along. Those that are more complicated or really suited for our panelists, I'll be asking them towards the end of the presentation. And that's about it. So thank you for being here again.
Thank you, Jake. So we're going to go over the agenda really quickly. We will start off with introduction, so you're familiar with our panelists. Then we'll jump right into the main topic of the night, which is social media and youth anxiety. We will cover how social media and gaming impact mental health, how as parents, we can help our children limit social media usage, and discuss coping skills for managing the mental effects of technology. We will also review the resources in the schools. At the end of the presentation, we will have time to answer your questions. Your questions will be answered by our panelists, so let me introduce them. We have our elementary counselors here, Mrs. Caitlin McKee and Mrs. Kelly Sparks, Mrs. Julia Ellis, Director of Elementary Education, Dr. Jerry Block, Director of Secondary Education, Dr. Jamie Snodgrass, welcome. She is our Director of Instruction and People Services. Dr. Hani Youssef, Assistant Superintendent of Education Services. Mrs. Jake Finch, Public Relations Coordinator. Last but certainly not least, we have two of our amazing interpreters, Yvonne and Maya, joining us tonight. From Daybreak, we welcome back Sid Sidambi, the Chief Operating Officer, and Jessica Hammond, our licensed clinical social worker. Sid and Jessica will be our presenters for tonight. Sid and Jessica, anything that you would like to add about yourselves?
Thank you so much for the introduction, Serena. We're really excited to do another event with the district and appreciate the partnership. As Serena mentioned, I'm one of the leaders here at Daybreak Health. Our mission is to support youth mental health and to work with schools. And I'm happy to introduce a little bit more about Jessica. Jessica is going to be the clinical expert for today. So, the way we like to do these parent classes is we know that you care about getting advice from someone who's an expert in what they do. And Jessica, because she is a licensed clinical social worker, is a therapist. So she's always working with kids who have, for example, anxiety and who are dealing a lot with social media and technology issues, which is, of course, the topic of this parent class. There's a quote here from Jessica, which is that, adolescence is a time of major transition. Youth are open, and she appreciates their realness. They're figuring out where they fit in and what drives them. It can be exciting, confusing, stressful, and she loves helping them tackle their mental health challenges to pursue their passions and enter the next stage of life. So thank you, Jessica, for taking out of your time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
I'm so glad I could be here tonight. And like Serena said, I know how hard it is as parents to make time to be here at 7 p.m. on a weeknight. But hopefully we have some information to share with you that will be able to help you tonight.
Awesome. Okay, so well, I was going to introduce to you my alarm clock. We named him.
Sorry about that, Serena.
No, that's okay. We named him Jackson, and we've actually had him for 15 months, 2 weeks, 4 days, and is, I don't know, like 7 hours, but who's really counting, right? And I thought that it would be very appropriate for me to introduce him because I've never been so anxious until he started walking and now running. And there are just so many moments where I wanted to just wrap him up and bubble wrap and hide him from the playground so he wouldn't risk hurting himself. In the left picture, you can see his little boo-boo at the upper lip because he's running and he's testing his body. And then, you know, I had an aha moment. If I try to protect him and limit his abilities to learn about his body out of my own fears, right? Am I stopping his learning opportunities? So I'm going to tie it back to our presentation because as parents, we want our kids to be happy, to be anxious free, right? That's why we're here tonight. But what if we see these moments when our kids are struggling as their opportunities to learn something new? So I'm going to give you an example. When our kids come and say, Mom, Dad, I'm so anxious about school, or I'm too anxious to talk to my counselor, can you do it? If my kids said that to me, my first reaction would be like, all right, let's go tomorrow, 8 a.m. I'm going to be in your counselor's office. We're going to have that talk. I'm going to fix this for you, right? That's a normal reaction as parents. But what if we use this opportunity to validate their experience? It's normal to feel that way, to talk to a counselor, to deal with school, to deal with conflicts with your peers. We validate them, but we also use that opportunity to teach. So they learn how to manage their anxiety, to manage their stress, to deal with the conflicts, whether that's with the peers or, you know, teachers or counselors. These are the skills that they will carry on for the rest of their life. So that when they go to the university, when they're in college, they won't call you and be like, can you talk to my counselor, right? Because they have the skills. Mm-hmm. So my challenge for all of you is that we can try to reframe our thoughts from what can I do to fix my kids' problems to what do I want my kids to learn from this challenge and how do I do it? So tonight, hopefully you will learn something new that you can apply to teach your kids and resources that we as a district can offer to support your children's growth. Okay, so with that being said, I'm gonna bring this back, Jessica and Sid, to start off the night.
Awesome, thank you so much, Serena. He is adorable.
Thank you.
But I also think it's a great message that, you know, we have to help kids help themselves. We have to help them build the tools and skills, even if our instincts are to solve all their problems for them. So really, really great. And I feel like I've been eating corn wrong all along when I look at that picture on the right. So that's a lesson for me too.
He teaches us a lot of new things.
Fantastic. All right, let's dive in. So we're going to start with some facts about youth and social media and technology. So the first statistic is that both youth and adults check their phones 150 times a day. To some of you, this may be shocking. To some of you, this may feel like an understatement. But just to prime it up, you know, we're really, really glued to our phones, and it's not just kids, right? 90% of youth go online daily. And so this is now a really important part and an integral part of a kid's life. 24% say they go online almost constantly. And I think this is where we start to get into the territory that we're trying to understand today around the impacts of social media and technology on anxiety and youth mental health. Because when you begin to understand that almost 1 in 4 kids are online all the time, it kind of drives home how this is a really, really fundamental and profound way that, you know, their existence and their daily being has been affected. 77% of parents say their children get distracted by their devices and don't pay attention when they're together. This is probably a statistic that everybody here can probably relate to. 50% of kids say they feel addicted to their mobile device. And I think what's really interesting here is that kids themselves are admitting this in this survey. I think sometimes we have an opinion that kids are oblivious, they don't know how technology affects them. But you know, when you see that, when you see the statistic, it shows you that actually they do have a sense about it. It may just be that they're not fully able to figure out how to do something about it. So we're going to talk a lot about the negative impacts of social media. But before we do that, we felt it's also important to address some of the positives of social media. And the reason for this is that only by understanding the positives can you have a realistic view of why kids may be spending so much time on social media. And it also helps you understand what the negative effects are versus some of those positive effects. So the first positive effect is it's a great tool for staying in touch with close ones. And I think this sometimes gets lost in the noise, but this is how kids are staying in touch, whether it's with their friends, their cousins, family members. That low friction does mean you have more relationships in your life. And having more relationships in your life has actually been shown to have positive correlation to mental health effects. The second is it's instant communication, relates to the first one. The third is that it's a great tool with communities, organizing groups, meetups, etc. I think this is something that really has a profound impact on kids' abilities to create social connections within their friend groups, within their school environment. You can see it whether it's causes that kids rally around to help others, whether it's sporting groups, or whether it's simply groups aligned around certain interests like gaming or other areas. It is really a tool that helps forge social connections. And then of course for companies, it's great for customer feedback. If a kid is using a product, they are able to talk with companies. They even learn a little bit about business and technology in doing so. Oops, sorry about that. Right. But now let's talk about the next negative effects of social media. So, and I'll hand it off to Jessica here, who can kind of jump into some of these.
So we're going to go into a lot more depth on a lot of these, but some of the negative effects of social media are that kids are using it in excess and it's becoming an obsession. It's increasing symptoms of anxiety and other mental health related issues, as well as self-esteem. It's negatively impacting kids' relationships. They're being distracted. They're not going out as much. Family relationships are declining because everyone in the family is on social media. They're lacking social skills, in-person social skills. And there's long-term implications for kids by what they're putting on social media. And a lot of younger kids don't realize this. So we're going to go into all these areas in a lot more depth in the coming slides.
Great. Well, let's start with some grounding around the topic of what exactly social media addiction is. I think this is an important topic for parents, Jessica, because they're trying to understand, okay, social media is very normal. All kids do it. Is my kid addicted to it, or is it just something which all kids do a lot, right? And I think it's a question that actually is confusing around any type of addiction, but especially with social media, given how prevalent it is. So let's jump in. The first thing that we like to mention is that social media addiction can actually be a behavioral disorder, and it can amplify the symptoms of ADHD, of youth depression, of oppositional defiant disorder, of youth anxiety. And when a child is addicted to social media, it turns into a little bit of a never-ending spiral. So I think, Jessica, and tell me if you agree here, it's a lot more serious than people think, right? It's not just being on social media a lot.
No, and it's like any addiction, really, whether drugs or alcohol or eating. it influences your brain in a way that your actions and your behaviors are going to negatively impact you, and you can't control it. It becomes an obsession, and it is this never-ending cycle of always wanting more and more and more.
And so let's jump into, before we jump to kind of why, I'm sorry, how to help kids. It's important to understand why it's so addicting and what's going on in the brain. And so, one of the examples that's useful to look at are social media applications. And so, this is actually some research that came from some academic work where social media applications actually use the same sort of psychological levers as a slot machine. So you pull a lever and immediately receive either an exciting reward, a match, or a prize, for example, on certain apps, or nothing. And we cannot know when we will be rewarded. And more often than not, we don't find anything interesting or gratifying, much like gambling, but that's precisely what keeps us coming back. So I think, the real takeaway here for parents is that when we think about what kids are up against with some of these apps, they are working within a framework where it has been specifically designed to be addictive, a lot of the same way as a slot machine is. It's also a profit-driven business. I think now we're pretty familiar with this, with things like Facebook and all the discussions been there. But the more time a customer spends on these platforms, the more profit is made through advertising. That's why the platforms don't charge for them. And in a way, this is pretty obvious that the eyeballs are kind of what's driving profit. But I think it's important to understand that because it's such a big profit driver, the entire apps or the entire experiences have been driven to create more and more emphasis on attention. And these are really good designers and really good engineers who are building this, and specifically trying to keep kids and adults on it for longer. So how to know if your youth is addicted? We are, I think are we able to do the poll here, Jake? It's like I don't see the button. So maybe we'll skip this. So let's jump straight in. So Jessica, would you mind talking about some symptoms of how to know if your child is addicted to social media?
Yeah, so some of the symptoms that you're going to see in social media addiction are excessive media consumption. So a teen who is constantly on some sort of device, or a child. Increasing reliance on social media as a way to feel good. So just normal everyday experiences aren't doing it anymore. They're needing to go online to get those feel good feelings. And an inability to stop the behavior, even when there's negative consequences happening because of it. Also decreased physical social engagement. So a child who's beginning to isolate more, stay home, not go out and see friends. There's going to be negative impacts at school. So a decline in grades, maybe even attendance. Peer relationships at school will be affected. So those are things to look for. An increase in irritability and some sense of sadness after separating from their social devices. Also, on the flip side, anxiety as well. Teens and youth can feel really anxious when they're not around it to be able to check what's going on, see if they've gotten any likes. And so those are some of the things to look out for in your child.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, right, Jessica, because on the one hand, kids need social media to be able to create relationships with their peer group. If you isolate them from social media, it can be very difficult for them. On the other hand, some of the behaviors that they can be exposed to online, whether it's bullying or excessive focus on appearance, or other kinds of things that are unhealthy behaviors, then it can negatively impact their social relationships. And just the sheer act of being glued to their phones that long can make it hard for them to connect in person. So it is really a double-edged sword there, isn't it?
It is.
And when just curious, Jessica, when you think about the kids that you've worked with over the years, has this been something that has been gradually increasing, or have you noticed it for a long time?
I've noticed it for a long time. I used to work at a crisis facility where we had teens come in who were in crisis because a parent took a phone away or a video game away. But I feel like it has been here, but it is definitely increasing. I think the pandemic has had a lot to do with an increase in media consumption. And the kids that I have talked to, like reported earlier in the statistic that you read, a lot of the kids are saying, I don't know how to stop. I want to, but I don't know how. And these are some of the clients that I'm working with.
Yeah. So let's, look at some causes of addiction. And I think this is an important topic because I think while social media has been designed to be addictive, kids are more likely to be addicted if they're feeling, other emotions that are driving them to seek refuge in social media. So for example, one of them can be that they feel overwhelmed. And as Jessica mentioned, the only time that their anxiety goes down is when they're engaging with online media. Another can be that they're lonely. They feel extremely lonely at school. They feel like this is where the social media is where everything is going on. And it really genuinely helps them feel more connected. Another one could be that they're bored. Another one could be that they're stressed or depressed. And, I'm interested, Jessica, is, we talk about maladaptive coping behaviors, right? If a kid is feeling, for example, anxious or depressed, sometimes they can resort to alcohol or drugs. Does social media fall into that category? Is this a different kind of thing?
No, absolutely. And like we've been talking about, it is an addiction, just like drugs and alcohol or eating or any other addictive behaviors. Kids are using it to make themselves feel better. If they are feeling depressed, it makes them feel a little bit happier. If they're feeling anxious, if they're having social anxiety, they don't have to go out. They can also sort of escape and not have to deal with the problems that are presented in front of them.
Yeah. And so, when we think about the causes of addiction, I think it's also important to dig a little deeper here and try to understand them. So I think the first point is that escapism into this virtual world allows them to actually retreat from the problems of the world. And I think that sounds very dramatic, but when you think about the games that kids play, whether you think about World of Warcraft or League of Legends or any of these other kinds of video games, they're not only video games, but they're social games. And you have an avatar, you have a whole world that you can explore. And it really is something where can be extremely escapist and allow the child to completely retreat from what's actually going on, whether it's they're stressed out about school or their friends, or simply, something else in their home life that is causing them stress. This really does turn into some, a way to escape all that, which can then lead to addiction. Another reason that kids can sometimes be addicted to social media is that they may feel disconnected from their friends or families. They may feel as though they don't belong. And this allows them to then say, oh, I'm going to build my virtual world where I can be safe, accepted, loved, which is better than the actual world. Another could be just they're simply shy. They're struggling with the actual mechanics of building those real life relationships. And they can be more confident behind the keyboard, making new friends and expressing themselves more openly. Jessica, any thoughts on this? I think the last one is really interesting too, right? How, just at the time when kids are supposed to be building the muscles of how to interact with others, this turns into a really easy way to not have to deal with that because you can be behind the keyboard, there's no eye contact, it's easier to say things because you can just type them, or maybe you don't even need to type anything or say anything, you can just kind of exist in that world.
Yeah, I think right now, a lot of educators and teachers are saying that there has been an academic decline with the pandemic, but there has also been a huge social decline as well. And children are having a very difficult time interacting socially. And for a child who is shy or one who has social anxiety or just someone who's coming out of the pandemic that really has kind of lost some of those social skills, this is a great way for them to just sort of escape and not have to engage in person. And they are more confident behind the keyboard and they can express themselves. And sometimes that expression can be negative, it can be positive. But that's where a lot of online bullying takes place, is kids who wouldn't necessarily say something in person or saying things behind a screen.
Yeah. And hey, Jessica, I want to jump in with a question here, because I know we have Q&A later, but it's good to, this is a good one even at the beginning, as we're diving in more. This question was from an audience member, a parent who asked, at what age should we allow them to join social media like Facebook, excuse me, TikTok, etc.? I feel like I want to not allow it, but at the same time, I don't want them more anxious because all their friends have it. I think that really gets to the heart of the issue here.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a thing that a lot of parents struggle with younger kids, is when to allow them to have access to that. And I think there's a few things. I think it depends on your child and their maturity level, family expectations and boundaries, and what you think is appropriate. But I do understand that you don't want your child to feel left out because all their friends are on it as well. I think establishing some ground rules around social media use is really important if you are going to allow that. And so that they know specifically what is expected and what they are allowed to do. We'll talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation. So I'll just kind of leave it right there.
Yeah, that's great. Seeing just a little bit more on how social media affects the brain. And the takeaway of this is to really understand that this is really tough for kids to have to fight. Social studies have found that when a child receives a like on social media, the same circuits of the brain are activated that would be if the youth had won money or eaten chocolate. So it's those same dopamine receptors that are reacting to that positive feedback on social media. And, to make this even more real, I think, when you see kids these days who are, between, let's say, 12 to 18, and they're on Instagram, they often can have hundreds and hundreds, in some cases, even thousands of friends. And so as they're getting those likes, they're getting that positive feedback, it is actually giving them a little bit of a dopamine rush and a kind of high, and creating a cycle of desire for them to recreate that positive feeling. And so they do more posting of different posts, they do more checking of social media, and they're really trying to get those same dopamine, senses released as, analogously they would have with drugs and alcohol. And I think there's, it's interesting, there's an age restriction for alcohol and drugs, but none for social media. I mean, technically some apps check your age, but I think we know that many kids are on it much younger than those apps even are really strictly enforced. So it is an interesting question to think about there.
I just wanted to add too, there's a lot of things playing against kids. The apps are made to be addictive. It increases the dopamine response, but children at this age, also the reward center of their brain is very sensitive at this age. And so they also have that, as their brain just isn't developed in a way. And so, yeah, that's another thing to take into consideration.
Absolutely.
Biology.
And digging into now more of the impacts and how social media can affect self-esteem. There have been studies that have shown higher depression rates amongst people who use more social media. Remind your child that what you see on social media are only snippets of someone's life and what they are proud to post. This seems obvious, but I think we all forget it. And what is posted is usually an exaggerated view of reality. And there's another important fact here, that the studies have shown that for every one rejection that we get, we need 7 affirmations to balance that, which means that we are a lot more receptive, to any negative feedback. So when you think about your child and you think about, something that they post, maybe a photo or something else, and even if they get lots of nice comments, any comments that they get that are negative is really, really going to affect them. And that's not just because they're especially sensitive. It's because our brains are wired to receive that negative feedback in a more kind of exaggerated manner. So Jessica, let's jump to the meat of it, which is how to help. This is why parents are on here. We've kind of explained how social media is affecting the brain, why it's so addictive. We talked at a high level about some of the positives and some of the negatives. Let's get really to what parents really want to hear, which is how to help. And so can you talk, Jessica, about educating your child and what it's important to emphasize here?
Yeah, so I think it's important that the parents are educated as well as their children. And so parents are doing a great job by being here tonight and can take all this information back and have a constructive conversation with their child if they are seeing concerns. We really want to point out that kind of what Sid just said, that it's important for your child to understand that what they are seeing on social media is just a small snippet of a person's life. It's filtered, it's curated, it is a perfect sort of what the person wants other people to see. They're going to post things that are going to get a lot of likes, get a lot of attention. No one's going to post themselves in sweats with a messy hair bun. It's doing exciting, fun things, not just sitting around doing everyday things. So I think it's really important to drive home that point. Also, it's really important for parents to talk with their children about what they're posting, because there are consequences for that and they can be lasting. Someone in middle school isn't going to be thinking that what they post right now might affect their college admission or a job way down the road. And even if it's something on Snapchat that's there and then gone a few seconds later, or if they post something and then delete it, kids now can screenshot things. And so what you put out there, even if you take it down, someone else could have it. So it's important to talk with your child about privacy settings and what they're actually putting out there for everyone to see.
Yeah, and I think, these 2 points are really interesting to think about together, Jessica, right? Because on the one hand, it's important to help kids understand that this isn't reality. It's kind of this curated thing. You don't have to assume that everybody's life is better than yours. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean that what's on social media doesn't matter. It really does matter. It's part of your digital footprint. It's part of your record. Even if it's a Snapchat, it can be screenshotted. It can be sent around, and the repercussions can be long lasting, and the repercussions can be really swift. So, we can understand how kids could be confused by even some of the mixed messages here, which is, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just social media, versus, but it actually does matter, right?
Exactly.
Great. And this question relates to the one that had been asked before, Jessica. Would you mind sharing a little bit about boundaries?
Yeah, so again, kind of like I mentioned before, it's important to talk, I think, have a family discussion about what boundaries and expectations are going to look like for your family regarding media use. If you haven't set any boundaries and you want to, I think just being honest with your child, like, hey, we've kind of just, let you have at it, but as a family, we're going to start some expectations, limitations around media use. And you might get some pushback at first. But I think just being honest with your child about the reasons why. Also, I think for kids who are 10 to 13 years old, if they are on social media, you're going to want to monitor what they follow, what they're posting a little bit more closely. Make sure that they're protected and not engaging things that could be risky. With older youth, you want to give them a little bit more freedom, show that you trust them, and give them a little bit more independence. If you do have concerns, there are third-party monitoring services out there like Bark, which will alert you to certain themes or language that's being used, things that are being looked at and accessed. And around, like, an example around some of the boundaries, you can say, once all your schoolwork is done, then you can play video games at night. We're going to have a family rule of no cell phones at the dinner table. So just what really works for your family and your child, but just letting them know that you do have expectations about what their use is going to look like.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, when we think back to that question of, what age should they be allowed? Should they not be allowed? It's a little bit more of a spectrum and a continuum, right? How are you going to be involved with social media? What are you going to be using? When are you going to be using it? And really getting into the details there.
Yeah, I think it's important to be curious too when you have a conversation with your child, kind of like you just said, what is it that you're looking at? What are the benefits of it? What do you like about it? What are you looking at? Just to get a better idea, an overall picture of what your child is doing.
Absolutely. And talk about alternatives, Jessica, because as we mentioned, sometimes this can be a coping mechanism for kids, right? And so a big part of this battle is creating other ways that are healthier for them to cope. So would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I encourage parents to talk with their children when it's not a heated moment or there aren't a lot of issues going on. You don't want to go in and your child's been on their phone for 2 hours and be like, get off your phone, like it's a day. So when things are calm, talk with them, maybe create a list ahead of time of things that they can do, whether it's hobbies that they're interested in, cooking or arts and crafts, reading a book, listening to music, playing music, kicking a soccer ball around with their friends, skateboarding, biking, whatever it is that they like to do that helps them cope with issues that are going on in their life, creating that list ahead of time so that when they're in the moment, they don't have to think of something, because that's really hard to do. But I just want to note that those are things that we can all do right now. However, if you feel like your child is exhibiting some of the addictive symptoms that we've talked about, or if you feel like they're using social media as an escape, as a way to cope with problems, that's when you might want to seek out some additional help from a therapist, because there's more going on there.
Yeah, and just want to jump back, Jessica, to the previous slide for 1 second. Excuse me. We had a question about boundaries that I thought was relevant to this slide, which is which apps can help monitor social media screen time? And I think that's an interesting question, because I think it's interesting to answer it if you know the answer to that. But also, how would you help parents think about, should they be monitoring their kids' social media, or how to kind of think about that?
So the one that I do know about is Bark. That's a third-party monitoring system. I don't know much about it, but I do know that it's a service that a parent can access. And in terms of your child, again, I think it goes back to knowing your child, knowing their maturity level and what you feel like they can and cannot handle, and if they're going to be making appropriate decisions or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, let's keep going here. Why is it important, Jessica, that even as we try to work with kids and share this information with parents about the ills of social media and ways to control it, that we keep in mind that these are just different times?
Yeah, so kids nowadays, social media technology is intertwined into their everyday life. It's used at school, it's used for homework, it's used for group projects. It's way kids talk to their friends, their family. And it's different from when parents were growing up, when you just went out and hung out with neighborhood kids, did things in person. And so again, if there is any confusion or concern, or why aren't you just doing it the way that I did it, to really try and engage with your child and get a better understanding of not only some of the harder things about social media, but some of the beneficial things that they're gaining from.
Yeah, that's great. And just want to jump back to this slide for a second. We had a great comment from someone on the CME team who mentioned that, and they actually manage social media for the district as well, which is that one thing that it's vitally important for parents to have are their children's passwords and logins. Of course, kids may start accounts on their own, but it's a good starting point for expectations, right, Jessica? I think that's the point there, which is right. This is something that we're going to be kind of in control with together.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Great. Let's go to the next one. Why is it important that parents themselves are not addicted to social media, Jessica? How does that impact what kids do?
So parents are actually their child's biggest role model. Their behavior is going to be seen by their child. And if a parent is able to show appropriate use, their child's gonna see that. So let's say you come home from work at the end of the day, you just want a few minutes to just sort of zone out, look at TikTok, go on social media, whatever it is. I think that that's totally appropriate, and your kids are going to be doing that, but set a limit so you're not doing it all night long. Or if your child comes in to talk with you about their day, you're not just sort of ignoring them, looking at them over your screen, but putting your phone down, showing them, you know, this is how to engage in a conversation, to give someone your full attention. And I think, you know, your phone down at dinner and talking with the family about what's going on is important. Also, I think it's a good opportunity to talk with your child like, hey, I saw someone posted this the other day. It kind of made me feel uncomfortable. What do you think? Has this ever happened to you before? How have you handled it? To have a discussion about uncomfortable things that come up, or someone said something kind of negative about me, or what I put out. How have you handled that? So not only being a good role model, but actually using it as a way to engage in conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this kind of harkens back to that statistic that we had earlier, right, Jessica, which is that checking phones constantly is not just something that kids do. It's something that adults do as well. And it's very easy for adults to make an excuse like, well, my kid's on their phone all the time, so I may as well be on my phone. But again, that's creating a little bit of a vicious cycle of kind of mutually reinforcing behaviors, right? Great. We're going to talk, actually, we'll jump to the Q&A first. And so we're now going to open up to some questions from the audience. Before that, I'd love to run the poll that we were going to run. So I'm going to jump to, I'm going to let Jake launch that poll for the audience. It's going to ask everyone in the audience a question about their kids' social media usage. And then we will share the results anonymously with the group. And so the question is, how many hours a day do you think your child spends on social media and or social gaming? So whether it's Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, or whatever other games they're playing, how many hours a day do you think your child spends on that and or social gaming? We'll give everyone just a chance to answer now.
We're getting answers very fast.
Fantastic. It's not a tough one.
Can you see the poll results, or is that only me?
It'll just be you. And when you end the poll, Jake, you'll be able to publish the results for us.
Okay.
Yeah. Give everyone just a second more. And then when you feel ready, Jake, feel free to close it out.
Okay.
How many hours a day?
I just shut it down and sharing the results. Okay.
Wow. Really, really interesting. So 35% of you said 4 hours or more. So that is an amazing amount of time that we are noticing kids on social media and or social gaming, considering that they need to be in school all day and then, you know, are also need to sleep. And another 18% said 3 hours. And so, you know, we've got over half of the parents here saying that their kids spend, you know, 3 or 4 hours, which is an enormous amount of time. And I think, you know, we all know that this happens a lot, but I think the data really brings it home. So thank you, Jake, for launching that. So let's now jump to some of the questions that we had from the audience. We have some great questions here, Jessica. So I'm just going to kind of go through them. The first one is relates a little bit to the borderline of where, you know, parents are struggling with what to do about their child's behavior. It says, you know, my child is addicted to some YouTube channels. A teenager cannot be controlled. I feel helpless. You know, I'm even trying to control the internet connections, but that can be tough to do. And so, yeah, I really need help. They're, you know, missing their homework assignments, etc. What would you say, Jessica, to this parent? How should they evaluate a next step in terms of what to do?
Yeah, I think a lot of parents feel this way, feel really helpless. And this is where a real honest conversation needs to take place. And if the parent is seeing that some addictive behaviors are happening with the social media use, that you might want to begin to look at some counseling services to get more at the root of what's going on. Also, a therapist would be able to talk with you and give you some coping skills sort of in the moment on how to deal with this. So that's what I would suggest.
I also want to invite other panelists as well. If there's anything else that you want to add, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Serena.
I'm going to make a process note for a moment. Please don't raise your hand. We're not answering questions verbally, like you won't be able to ask them verbally. You need to type your question in the Q&A for us, please.
Thank you, Jake. That's helpful. And I'll jump to the next question here, which is, to a prior point, kids are living in completely different times than we did. I think sometimes as parents, we need to acknowledge that this is hard and it's okay that we struggle with it. Figuring out how to monitor or control our kids' use of social media is hard and complicated. And it was a lot simpler when we were kids, and our generation of parents are really the first who have had to figure this stuff out. I think that's a great point, Jessica, from a parent. And would you mind sharing a little bit more about also just the grace that parents should be giving themselves in terms of how difficult a struggle this can be?
Yeah, and I think that parent said it beautifully. It is really hard and it is very different. You don't, like the other parent said earlier, you don't want your child missing out on opportunities to make connections, make friendships, but you're also concerned about the amount of time that they are spending. And this generation of parents are sort of, we are the first having to deal and navigate this road of social media. And we're all doing the best we can given the situation, because honestly, we just want the best for our children. So absolutely, I think parents should definitely give themselves some grace and know that it's all sort of new territory.
Yeah. And, another question we have here, Jessica, relates to some of the statistics that we were presenting earlier, and some of the mechanics around how these things affect the brain of a child. But it also comes down to parent communication. So the question is, it's nice to know this information, but do you really think that if we try to explain this to kids, they would really comprehend this information since their brains are still developing? Jessica, what are your perspectives on that? Could explaining how these things work to kids actually, will that matter?
Yes and no. So we're dealing with young kids who don't want to hear from their parents about, the negative effects of social media because it is important in their lives. But I think that they do take in that information. They do hear it. I believe they understand it. I know some of my clients, the documentary on social media, and we've talked about it. They've gotten it. They understand the implications. So yeah, I do feel like kids do understand, and whether they show an interest when you're actually talking to them or not, that information is being received.
Yeah, and I've also noticed that kids like feeling like they are understanding how things work, and they don't like the wool being pulled over their eyes. Yeah. Right. So if you can share a little bit of it, hey, you're spending a lot of time on this thing. This is kind of how it's working. This is the impact that it's having. Then, sometimes kids are actually quite receptive to that.
Yeah, maybe just starting a conversation about, what do you know about this, and seeing where they're at. You might be surprised already what they do know. Yeah,
that's great. Let's hear from some of the CME counseling team, if anyone wants to jump in here. And this is a question that I think relates well to more of the high school age. So maybe if we have any high school counselors, they can weigh in. When should you draw the line with dealing with high schoolers, 15 and 17-year-olds? I see the defiant symptoms come out, yet grades are A's and B's. So it's a hard battle to pick. Would love to hear from any of the CME counseling team on this one.
I would say having those open conversations are an important piece, setting those clear expectations of what you expect from your child. They do like boundaries, even if they don't admit it. I think, having them recognize what they're doing and what they need to do and having that conversation. But again, just being open and honest and having them start, recognizing what their job is, and that, social media is, really something that, isn't forbidden, but it is something that, should come after they get their job done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's another question here, Jerry, that speaks really well to the comment you made, which is we don't have cable or TV. So our child's YouTube or Minecraft, excuse me, is all they have. So what am I supposed to do? I think I know what you're going to suggest here, Jessica, and it relates to Jerry's point, which is treat it like it's a form of entertainment and set boundaries around it, and don't forbid them completely from it, especially if they don't have TV. They are allowed to have some entertainment, but you should control that diet like you would control a food diet, right?
Yeah.
Great. Well, I have a question, and I'm happy to have anyone take this one. Jessica, maybe we'll give it a second, and if the CME team wants to jump in, they can take it. Otherwise, feel free. What about when you make these suggestions and you get a child that resists? You suggested talking to someone or a professional about it, but do you think that a 13-year-old should be forced to talk to someone about it? Yeah, would love to hear. Serena, you want to grab this one? What do you think?
I see Kelly unmuted herself.
Oh, perfect. Go for it, Kelly.
Actually, I was going to chime in a little bit. Maybe I'll backpedal a little bit and then kind of hit this one, is that, we're talking a lot about, our kids that maybe are tweens, 10, 12, 13. And, just for those parents who have kids that are younger than that, we know that these habits start very early. And, the American Academy of Pediatrics says that kids really only should be online or gaming or on their electronics for an hour or two. And we know that with the pandemic, those things changed and our expectations changed. And so I saw in some of the questions is like, we kind of need to reel it in a little bit, because we were very lenient during this time because of where we were at. So, trying to get parents to reevaluate what their expectations are. Some of the things is that, having students or children use their electronics, especially our younger ones, when we're just trying to navigate, whether it be gaming, which is typically what they start with, or YouTube before we get into the social media, limiting their time, obviously, using it in the main room so that you can hear and see what your students and your children are doing on there. And also, it's really important for parents to be engaged in the technology. So learning about the games that they're playing, the apps that they want to download, again, that starts really young. And, how many times have, your kids come up to you and said, can I download this on your phone? And, all of a sudden you've got this app that you don't know anything about. So, really being aware and learning about what they're learning so that you can help them, because they will make mistakes. They will make mistakes. Gaming, with our younger students, we call it rage quit, where they are playing a game and they lose control of their emotions. And then all of a sudden they've said and done things that everybody hears. And so, talking with students about when they make those mistakes and, what the expectation was and how you can build up their trust and your trust in them on social media and gaming. And so when they do get into that tween area and you're starting to navigate whether or not you want to let them have this, whether it be, TikTok or Facebook or Snapchat, whatever app your kids are asking for, it's important to have already built that alliance and that trust with them, and also the knowledge. So when, kind of circling back to our 13-year-old, you may need to reel it in a little bit and figure out what your expectation is, what it is that they need from you, and how you guys can move forward together. You know, if a student doesn't want to talk to somebody outside, whether it be a counselor or a therapist or anybody, they're not going to. They're not going to be open to that. Now, they may later on, once you've built that trust and they feel comfortable with that. But if the resistance is there, you know, starting at home and building that relationship and that expectation. Serena, did you want to chime in with anything in there?
Yeah,
I was going to chime in too.
Okay,
go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you know, speak on what Kelly was saying about setting those boundaries. And I think another great resource is Common Sense Media. That has a whole parent section on social media and apps and games, and it actually breaks down, you know, more information about the gaming or about the app and the different age limits. So I think that that's a really great resource for parents to utilize. It's Common Sense Media.
thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you, Kelly and Caitlin. Real quick, I'm just going to answer the question. I would never force a 13-year-old because there's nothing more uncomfortable than sitting in that therapy room with 13-year-olds just staring at you. So it's more about planting a seed, all right, having this conversation about the pros and cons of social media and gaming, and just help them see if they have symptoms of addiction at home, normalize speaking to a therapist. And once again, just repetition, right? Not being forced, but having that open conversation over time, they will be open to getting that support when they're ready.
Great. Thank you, everybody. It was great hearing from all of you. And great call out on Common Sense Media, Caitlin. Actually, a lot of the, not sure if everyone could see the microscopic font citing the statistics, but a lot of those statistics were actually from Common Sense Media. They have a lot of great resources. Great. So I think, you know, we're running up on time here. So I do want to jump to just a final slide around getting support. Serena, do you want to explain a little bit of the resources that are available to parents in case they have, you know, they're experiencing issues with their kids around social media and anxiety or anything else and want to get some support?
Sure, but before I do, I'm just going to ask a check-in with Jake. Do you think that we can go a little bit over? I know we have like 8 more questions, or do we want to wrap it up with resources?
I personally would like to try to answer the questions if we can, but anybody who needs to jump off, I totally understand that.
Okay. So can we finish with the questions first?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
More time is better. So let's jump to another one, which is, so you know, it says you mentioned the reward part of a kid's brain is sensitive at this age. What age range are you referring to? How can we assist this part of sensitivity that can affect them negatively so we can turn that around? I think it would actually be great to hear again from the CME counseling team, particularly from, you know, any of the experiences, any of the counselors more experienced with kids who are younger, specifically around this question of how to help trend development in the right direction when kids are really young, as they're kind of as they're approaching that teenage.
Well, I think it's important to know, and I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, is knowing your students' maturity level and what they are capable of comprehending and what they can and cannot, what they have access to. And so again, it becomes being very familiar with what is available to your student and being able to you know, set those boundaries, but it does start very young. Like we said earlier, you know, we have our students who are, you know, asking for apps and games and things that we don't know about, or we don't, you know, we need to learn about. So just being aware of what we can and can't control in those situations. Caitlin, did you want to jump in on that as well?
Yeah, I think another piece of kind of turning these behaviors around is just being really consistent. I think consistency is key, and you might make a new boundary or a new rule at home and your child gets really resistant and fights back a little bit, but sticking with the plan and following through with what you've set up, you know, they're going to eventually come around. And I think another great thing is creating that list of other options that your child can do instead of social media or, using technology if you are trying to limit it and kind of turn things around.
Yeah, that's great. And then I'm going to jump to Jake, who has some useful tips on a question, which is around using these different apps and social media usage, and just the technology piece for parents who are trying to grapple with all this.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a question that says, can you please share some ways to learn how to use all of these apps? Because I try my best to be on top, but I feel I'm not familiar with this. It is such a moving target to encounter these apps, and there are more that come up every week, and the kids kind of latch onto them. What I have found is that the kids generally are latching on to a small number of them, a handful, and there are some that are going to be very popular. Like right now, TikTok is very popular. Snapchat, not as much as it used to be, but that was a huge issue a couple of years ago. So I know that in my home, my kid is 20 now. I would sit down with her and have her teach it to me and try to make it fun. Okay, your mom's an idiot. Can you please show me how to do this? Make it light and make it fun, and have her actually go through it with you. If that's not enough of an interaction to get a sense of it, you can also start doing Google searches, and you'll probably pull up several different videos, YouTube videos on how these apps work. But I would really start with your kid. I want to also repeat again, make sure that you've got your children's login, make sure you know their phone code so you can open their phone, so that way you can see what's going on. That should be an expectation that you have with them from the moment a phone is given to them, that their phone is a privilege and that you're in charge of it. And as their parent, there are going to be times where you're going to want to look at it, and they're not going to like it, but that's part of the parenting part. You need to know what's going on at times. You may choose never to, because you may never have a reason, but when you have a reason, it's important that you have that access.
Yeah, such a great point, Jake. And I think love the point about diving in and just learning from your child, right? Because I think this is something that parents are sometimes a little afraid to do. Is if we're worried about social media, then should we be actually asking them questions about it? Should we be learning about it? And the answer, Jessica, you normally mention that the answer is yes. You should talk to your kid about it. What are you looking at on social media? Why do you find it so interesting? Because then you will know more about what they're actually getting out of it, what is negative, what is positive. We have a question here, which is, how do you know how much of the anxiety is being caused by social media? And Jessica, I'd be interested in your perspective on this. And I'm guessing it starts with asking them, right? What are you looking at? How does it make you feel, right?
Yeah, and we do know there is a correlation with social media use and anxiety, but really finding out what are the positives that you're getting from this, and when are you noticing that the anxiety is coming about? Is it when they're not using it? Is it when they are using it? And what it's related to.
Yeah, that's great. And then we have two questions here that both touch on a really interesting relationship between academics and technology use. I'll just do them in order. My kids use schoolwork as a reason for spending lots of time on their computer. How do you set boundaries on social media without affecting their time on studying or schoolwork without spying?
Can I say that I think the first issue is the word spying? There's not anything wrong with the question, and I understand where it comes from, but you're not spying, you're parenting. Your child has to be watched, even at 16, even at 17. So if it's possible to have them do some of that work in a more public family area, that might be one option. So that way you have eyes on them and you know what's going on. And again, you're not spying, you're a family, you're together. And I think what I haven't heard a lot of, but might be helpful, is that as a parent, what I found with kids is that they constantly need some interaction. And especially with teenagers, where they like to hole up in their room and bury themselves in their cave, and you've got to get them out of there with a crowbar. If there are things that you can start doing as a family that require them to be interacting with you more in the evening, they're going to have less time to be on social media. The same thing with extracurricular activities. If they can get into a sport where they have expectations of their time later on in the day, or they're in drama, or they're in clubs, or they're doing some activities, that's really helpful too. So you're limiting the amount of downtime they have to be using social media. That might be something that can work for some of your families.
That's great. Thank you, Jake. And then another question that touches on technology use in academics is, I'm a working mom and my teen is smart and maintains straight A's on all subjects. However, she's addicted to YouTube, TV serials, and other types of shows. She quickly finishes all her homework and spends the rest of the day watching TV and YouTube. Any suggestion on how I can control this? Jessica, I think, maybe I feel like this one relates a lot to what you had mentioned before about the nature of the relationship with the technology use. But there's also some interesting trade-offs here because, the child is doing very well in academics. They probably view it as, well, if I do well there, then I can do, I should be able to do whatever I want in these other areas with my free time. So how would you tackle this one? I think it's a really interesting one.
I would encourage the parent to, acknowledge the child's hard work, that they're getting everything done, they're maintaining really good grades, but then talk with them like, hey, I am a little concerned about the usage and the shows that you're watching, YouTube. And if they haven't put any restrictions in place to say, I think we need to start limiting this, maybe we can put a timer on it, and you can watch it for, 30 minutes, 35 minutes, whatever seems reasonable, and then take a break and then maybe go back to it a little bit later so that it's sort of a balance and it's not just all consuming.
Yeah, that's great. And it's not about it's not about putting boundaries on social media or technology use because it's going to impact academics. It's for reasons that relate to their well-being and their ability to be happy and well-adjusted overall, right? Great. And then this last question here is a perfect segue to our next section on resources and getting support. So I'm going to ask it, and then I'll jump to that section. Maybe you'll cover this while discussing available resources. Should we be approaching school counselors to deal with social media anxieties? Would love to know where to find therapists and counselors. Thanks. So Serena, I'll let you talk a little bit about this and kind of tee up other Daybreak supports as well.
Yeah, perfect question. So at the school site, your students do have access to their counselors. So you can definitely start there, let them know, and counselors would have resources that they can share with you, with us parents. And then from there, we can make that connection to outside support services. So as you can see on the screen, we have elementary school counselors. There are 5 amazing elementary school counselors, and we have the middle school counselors as well, and 2 at Hillside, 2 at Sinaloa, and 3 at Valley View. And high school counselors, as you can see, it is different for each school, but your students do have access to them. And there's a link to our district mental health and student wellness page. So that's on the website where you can access services outside of the school. And I'm also a resource if you have questions or you can't find the resource that you're looking for, you can definitely email me as well. I'm more than happy to provide that support. We also have a partnership with Daybreak Health, who can support our students and children. So Sid, why don't you share with us what Daybreak is and how students can access the services?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Serena. So, we at Daybreak Health, our mission is to support youth mental health. We work with kids age 11 to 19, and we support them with all sorts of mental health issues that are affecting kids, whether it's anxiety, depression, technology use, like we talked about today, and its effects, bullying, trauma, all sorts of things. And our team they're all licensed therapists who have a specific background supporting youth. They're extremely passionate about it. And this is their life's work. And then they deliver those services through our virtual teletherapy platform. So it's going to be one-on-one therapy sessions that the child is getting so that they can work on these areas. Now, the really, exciting thing is that we have a partnership with the district. And so if you speak to your child's school counselor who Serena mentioned, she mentioned across the different school sites, how many counselors there are. Just speak to any school counselor about your child. And if you and they feel like this could be a good fit, or it's at least worth doing what we call a virtual intake or wellness check session to see if this could be a good fit for your child, the school counselor can help you navigate that, and they'll be the ones that will determine whether this could be a good fit to get started. And then, if after that intake session, the child would like to get support, we can match them with a counselor on our team, a therapist on our team to support them. So please do start with your child's school counselor on the Simi Valley side, speak with them, and they will help you navigate either Daybreak Health as a resource, the other resources that the district has, or simply just provide you an outlet to be able to talk about your child and help to understand what could be helpful for them. And I should mention that, if you do end up using Daybreak Health Services, that it is sponsored by the district for a certain number of sessions. And so there will be no cost. And that's, really a testament to the great supports that the district is providing. Anything else to add there, Serena, on supports or anything like that?
No, not that I can think of.
Okay, great. Well, I know that we are over time. We've done the Q&A. I want to thank everyone for helping set up this. There were many folks on the Simi Valley side who made this parent class possible. Thank you to Jake. Thank you to Serena. Thank you to Jerry for helping with the content. Thank you, Jessica, for taking time out of your busy schedule, working with kids to share with the parents here. And then I'm sure that we will follow up with some of these links and resources for parents so that if they're interested in getting support, they can do that. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna wrap it up real quick. Just like Sid said, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We appreciate you just listening and participating. Hopefully you've learned something new. And once again, the webinar was recorded, so feel free to go back and watch it again for any clarification. It will be posted on the district website at the end of the week, by the end of the week. Before I let you all go, a lot of what we have shared can sound very scary, addicted to social media, that, all of that is terrifying, but please remember, what I've mentioned earlier today, these are opportunities to learn, right? So what do we want to teach our children? So with that being said, thank you everybody and have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.
Night.